First of all, I would like to start by thanking the organizer for giving me the chance to talk a little bit about the work that we have done in order to evaluate the impact of PED in growing pigs, and I will try to make it as fast and understandable as possible. First of all, just a couple of words to sort of justify why we were pursuing this objective. We are all well aware of the huge impact of PED in the swine industry due to the impact in suckling piglets, and there has been very nice works trying to evaluate the impact of this disease in sow farms, such as the ones that had been presented by Dane and others. But our question here was, is there a further impact, which of course is likely, and how big that might be? And there are a number of both field observation and data from experimental infections that are suggesting that when animals are exposed to the virus, when they are already in the growing stage, so after weaning, they do have higher mortalities, and they may actually perform worse in terms of average daily gain and feed conversion, some of which have been presented here and are presented in a poster and were mentioned yesterday. But our target here was to see what was the impact in actually the animals that are exposed to the virus when they are piglets but do survive, make it until the weaning, and they go to the following phase. So they are weaned, they go to the growing farm. How do they perform compared with non-exposed pigs? So the objective was sort of try to perform some kind of quantification of the impact of the porcine epidemic diarrhea virus infection in growing pigs by comparing 4 commonly used indicators: mortality, average daily gain, average daily feed intake, and feed conversion rate in batches of animals that had been exposed to the virus as piglets and animals that hadn't when they were suckling piglets. So just a hint of the results. Trust me that we did find, in fact, an impaired performance of the pigs coming from these PED-infected batches that actually were the ones that had been weaned in a PED-positive flow or sow farm. And we found an increased mortality, a decreased average daily gain, and an increased feed conversion rate. And I will walk you very, very quickly on how we did that. First of all, we did a screening on large data sets of productive records from different flows in order to select, first of all, the positive flows. In these positive flows, so flows that had broke with PED at least once during the period of study, which was approximately 1 year, we selected only the nursery and the wean to finish batches. And we did that because we wanted to compare how the animals performed after weaning, just when they had left the commercial sow farm after PED detection. So we were willing to remove these finishing batches that would have been through a nursery stage from which we would not have information. So we stick with these productive records from nursery and wean to finish batches. That left us with 33 positive flows, 11 of which produced nursery pigs, and 22 wean to finish pigs. So we had a couple of inclusion criteria for selecting the batches. First of all, we wanted to select the first positive PED batch, the first batch of pigs that had been weaned once the flow had been detected with PED, so the first one, that was our infected batch or case batch if you want. And then we wanted to select as a control the closest preceding PED negative batch of animals that had been weaned in that particular flow before the disease had been detected. And that would be the control batch. And for selecting the control batch, we had a couple of additional requirements. First of all, it had to be weaned at least 14 days before the infected batch. So we were willing to sort of make sure, as sure as possible, that they hadn't been exposed to the virus, but also they should have been weaned not more than 4 months before the infected batch, in order to make sure that other possible covariates that would be there would be as comparable as possible. So if this is the PED batch that had been weaned once the flow broke out positive, the control batch would have been within this range of weeks, from 2 to 4 months, 2 weeks to 4 months. And then we performed a couple of analyses on these pairs. So we did, just due to the sample set that I will tell you now, we did just a couple of non-parametric comparison of these productive records that I mentioned before, and we also compared how the nursery, how these pairs were different in terms, so if they were coming from nursery or wean to finish batches. So we finally ended up with 18 flows that fulfilled our inclusion criteria. So we ended up with 18 case and 18 control batches 4 of which were nursery, 14 were win to finish, but actually the productive records that we had from the win to finish batches were from the first stage after winning, so the first 60 days in the double stocking. So actually they weren't that different in terms of age. We took a look at the average mortality, average daily gain, feed intake, and feed conversion rate in the previous 4 months before the PED had been detected in the flow, and they were all within normal limits. So you can see here the evolution 4, 3, 2, and 1 month before the PED was detected in the flow of the mortality in the win to finish flows in the dashed line, and in the nursery in the solid line, and you see that they are within 4, 5, 6% more or less, with kind of certain variations. And you see here actually the values of the average daily gain in red, feed intake in blue, and feed conversion rate in green. And you have solid bars indicate the nurseries, and the squared ones indicate the win to finish. And even though there was some kind of variation, there wasn't a clear trend within these 4 months. So what happens when we include in this trend the data from the first animals that had been weaned in the positive flows? So first thing we see is that actually there is a steep increase in the mean mortality in these batches. You see that actually we moved from a range of approximately 5%, which was the graph that I just showed you, to around 15% very quickly in just this first batch of weaned pigs after the PED had broken the flow farms, pulling all the pairs. We also saw a decrease in average daily gain that is not evident from here due to the scale that we are using. No evident change in average daily feed intake, and this led to an increase in the feed conversion rate from 1.75 to around 2.3. So the pair comparison, actually, if we look at the data from each pair to pair, here you see how the values are scattered in the control batches that are somewhere between 0 and 10%, and then you see here in the infected, in the case batches, and you see how even though you do have some ones that are not so high, they are way more scattered, and that would give us a mean increase around 12%. And actually, if you look at the scatter of each pair in particular, so here we are plotting the mortality in the control batch with the mortality in the exposed or the case batch. For example, this one would be a batch that would have mortality around 6 or 7%, I guess, and 30% before and 30% after. You see that actually most of the values are well above this dashed line that would indicate where dots should fall if actually the mortality would have been the same before and after. So there is a clear trend towards higher values in the case batches, which I guess makes sense. What about the average daily gain, average daily feed intake, and feed conversion? Well, here you see the same graphs that I have shown you before. So in the average daily gain, we see a decrease of around 0.16 pounds per day. And here you see again the same graph as before. So here we are plotting the values from the unexposed batch with the ones from the exposed batch. And you see that most of the dots fall well below this line that would indicate equality of values before and after the PED had broken in the flows. For the average daily feed intake, though, it's not the same case. So you see that values are pretty much scattered around both sides of the line. And this leads us to a trend suggesting a marked increase in the feed conversion rate in the exposed batches compared with the non-exposed. Being this and this difference is significant compared with this, it's clearly not. There isn't that different. So as previously mentioned, we saw this impaired performance of the animals from these first PED batches compared with the negative ones, and how bad did they perform? Well, they had an increased mortality that ranged from 6 to 18%. They had a decreased average daily gain that was in the range of 0.07 to 0.26 pounds per day. And they had an increased feed conversion rate that was in the range of 0.3 to 0.8. So this study has certain caveats because that's kind of a quick and dirty, quick and dirty way of getting some kind of answer, some kind of feeling. The analysis was performed in a reduced data set, even though we tried to pull in everything we got, but that's how we ended up because we were quite strict with our inclusion criteria. And we were not able to do any adjustment by covariates such as the site, which probably makes sense given that we are measuring performance in a place and we are not actually controlling by that place. However, the differences that we found were fairly robust, fairly constant, and that suggests that actually there is a robust trend suggesting this decreased performance of the growing pigs that had been exposed as piglets during their suckling stage or period, compared with the ones that hadn't from the same flows, which should kind of hopefully control a little bit for other possible bias. The increase in mortality would be then in the range of between 6 and 20% more, and the decrease in average daily gain, feed intake, the decrease in average daily take and lack of affectance of the feed intake would yield this increase in feed conversion rate. If we make very rough numbers, we would see that actually if we assume that there is a cost of the 30 cents of the pound of feed for an animal from wean for the stage from wean to 40 pounds, this poorer feed conversion rate would represent around 16 cents more of cost per gain pound. So this would mean that, impact goes well beyond, of the disease goes well beyond the suckling piglets, and that's probably we should take into account when making numbers of the impact of the disease in the industry.